My personal story started 70 years ago in a Japanese concentration camp on the island of Java, where I spent 3.5 years with my mother and oldest brother. Coming out of the camp, we then spent an additional 5 years in a war-torn zone, which was Java at the time, which was going through independence from Holland. Then I was sent back to Holland to be in a foster home, and in that entire process of 8 to 10 years, I developed a huge self-hatred. In Indonesia, I would fight with Indonesian kids, and then I was sent to Holland, and I would fight the entire school at every recess. And eventually, that self-hatred, by the time I was old enough to find that expression, expressed itself in alcohol and drugs and other self-destructive behaviors. And then there came a time about 20 years ago when I decided that either there had to be another way, or I would simply curtail my journey on this planet and change form. And I decided that I was going to give another way a chance. And that other way, it took me a year of very intensive study, meditation, and nothing else, and simply focusing on what was the nature of my self-hatred. Where did that come from? How did I construct a creature so worthy of self-hatred? And in that process of figuring out how I constructed it, I was of course deconstructing it. And that is really the process we're using, is a deconstruction of the identity that everybody made up at an early age. And everybody makes up an identity which is based on a lot of guilt. And unless I realize that, I will think it's something outside of myself. I think it's my parents, or I think it's the war, or I think it's the weather, or I think it's that the waves are too noisy, whatever it is. I will think of something outside of myself that needs to change. And one of the fundamental and foundational premises of our work is that nothing outside of me can bring me anything that I need, and nothing outside of me needs to change for me to be happy. And my primary purpose, of course, my one and only purpose in this world, is to be at peace. And once I recognize that, I can get to work on what are the barriers to that awareness. And those barriers can be identified. And once they're identified, they can be deconstructed and transformed. Some of the ways in which we deconstruct, well, primarily the most important aspect of the work is feeling. And that to me, in the beginning, was a huge barrier, because I didn't feel. I had two feelings, and they ranged from numb to rage, and there was nothing in between. There was nuancing. There was no nuancing. So what I found very early in my process was what we call a feeling sheet. And I thank God on my bare little knees for the feeling sheet, because it allowed me to begin to identify what I was feeling. So I could recognize feelings of abandonment, I could recognize feelings of disappointment, of rage, of tiredness, of hopelessness, you name it. There's about 96 feelings on that sheet. And then I teach myself that I am choosing all those feelings based on a core belief that I hold. So that I'm training my mind to take the feeling, make it big, and then say, okay, what is the belief about me that is choosing this particular feeling right now? Because that belief is not true. If it were true, I'd be feeling joy. That's a given. If I'm in my true mind, if I'm in who I really am, I will be joyful. If I'm not, I'm believing something that is not true, and I need to deconstruct that. I'm no longer tolerant for a state of feeling or a being that I find no longer fascinating, interesting. I don't find it amusing anymore to be angry. I used to get incredible sense of power from being angry, and I was good at being angry. I practiced that a long time ago, and I developed a very good anger. In all my fighting, physical fighting, for example, in school or elsewhere, I was never hit. No one could touch me, because my rage was such that I was invulnerable physically. I don't find that interesting anymore. I don't find sadness interesting anymore. I don't get off on sad stories. They don't touch me. What touches me now is love. People often come to us with incredible stories of trauma, of sexual abuse, of emotional abuse, and I just listen and I don't react. And at the end of it, they say, well, doesn't any of this touch you? And I say, no, it doesn't touch me. because it's not the truth of who you are. The truth of who you are touches me. I will start crying when you and I connect with love. Then I'll cry. But in the story, I don't cry, because I don't believe the story. And the key to my work is not to believe my own story. And that's why I'm doing this work, because my temptation to believe my story is constant. And by working with your story and listening to your story, I train my mind not to believe mine. So it's a joint giving and receiving at all times.